The sharp morning light glinted off the silver Rolex on James Harper's wrist as he leaned against his Ferrari, flanked by his brothers Michael and Christopher. The three Harper heirs cut imposing figures in the quaint farmers' market that had sprung up on the outskirts of Westlake Village, an exclusive enclave where their family mansion stood as a landmark of generational wealth. Their casual designer clothes, worth more than what most vendors here made in months, marked them as outsiders, tourists among the working class. "Father said we need to reconnect with reality." James mimicked their father's gruff voice, earning chuckles from his brothers. As if spending a Saturday morning watching peasants sell produce would somehow make us better board members. At 27, James was the oldest and most cynical of the three, with dark hair swept back from a face that graced business magazines under headlines like "America's Most Eligible Corporate Heirs." Michael, 25, with a more athletic build from his college rowing days, scrolled through his phone, barely glancing at the market stalls. Christopher, the youngest at 23, actually seemed intrigued by the bustling marketplace, his hazel eyes, so like their mother's, taking in the colorful scene. "It's not terrible," Christopher murmured, inhaling the scent of fresh bread and flowers. "At least the coffee's decent." Their father, Richard Harper, CEO of Harper Investments, had insisted they spend time among real people after a board meeting where they dismissed concerns about worker conditions in one of their manufacturing plants. This excursion was his idea of teaching them empathy, one they were enduring only because their trust funds required regular proof of character development. "Let's just get something for the kitchen staff and go," Michael suggested, pocketing his phone. "Marta mentioned she needed strawberries for that dessert Father likes." As if summoned by his words, they spotted a humble strawberry stand at the end of the row. Unlike the other polished displays, this one was simply a wooden table with baskets of glistening red berries, tended by a young woman in modest, worn clothing. Her honey-brown hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and she worked with quick, efficient movements, serving customers with a smile that transformed her delicate features. "Perfect," James said, already bored. "We'll get the berries and then convince Father we've had our fill of real-world experiences for the month." They approached the stand as the crowd thinned, leaving them face-to-face with the strawberry seller. Up close, she was younger than she'd appeared from a distance, perhaps 20 or 21, with a sprinkle of freckles across her sun-kissed nose and remarkable amber eyes that seemed oddly familiar. "How much?" James asked, not bothering with pleasantries. The young woman looked up, those striking eyes meeting his. $8 for the small basket, 15 for the large. They were picked fresh this morning. $15 for strawberries? Michael scoffed. "Highway robbery for something you probably picked from someone else's field." Her smile faltered, but her voice remained steady. "I grow them myself, actually. Organic, no pesticides." Christopher, noticing a small scar near her hairline, partially hidden by her bangs, felt an inexplicable tug of recognition. He brushed it aside as the conversation deteriorated. "We'll take the large basket," James said, dropping a $50 bill on the table. "Keep the change. Maybe you can buy some clothes that don't look like they came from a donation bin." The young woman's hands stilled over the berries. Something flashed in those amber eyes, not just hurt, but a spark of defiance. "I don't need your charity," she said, pushing the bill back toward him, "and I certainly don't need fashion advice from someone who's probably never worked a day in his life." James blinked, unused to being challenged. "Do you have any idea who we are?" "Should I?" she countered, her chin lifting slightly. "We're the Harpers," Michael inserted, eyes narrowing. "As in Harper Investments, Harper Technology, Harper Media, the family that owns half the valley," she finished for him. "I know who you are, everyone does. That doesn't entitle you to be rude." Christopher, watching her closely, felt increasingly unsettled by her familiar mannerisms. The way she tilted her head when challenging them, the slight gesture of tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. It reminded him of someone, though he couldn't place who. "What's your name?" he asked suddenly, interrupting James's brewing retort. She hesitated, then answered, "Emma. Emma Sullivan." "Sullivan," James repeated with a smirk. "Not exactly a name that opens doors around here." Emma handed him the basket of strawberries with a tight smile. "We can't all be born with silver spoons, Mr. Harper. Some of us have to earn our way." As she extended her arm, her sleeve rolled up slightly, revealing a small birthmark on her wrist, a distinctive coffee-colored shape like a crescent moon. Christopher felt the air leave his lungs. That birthmark. He'd seen it before in family photos on the wrist of... "I think we're done here," James announced, taking the berries. "Enjoy your little stand, Emma Sullivan. Some free advice. Attitude doesn't sell berries." As they turned to leave, Christopher lingered, staring at Emma with growing disbelief. "That birthmark," he said quietly. "You've always had it?" Emma instinctively covered her wrist, surprised. "Yes." "Why?" "No reason," he said, but his mind was racing. "Thanks for the strawberries." Walking back to the car, Christopher couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous had just occurred. The birthmark, those amber eyes, the scar on her hairline, they all pointed to something impossible, yet increasingly undeniable. Back at their mansion over lunch on the terrace overlooking manicured gardens, Christopher couldn't focus on his brother's conversation. His thoughts kept returning to Emma Sullivan, the strawberry seller with their sister's eyes. 15 years ago, their youngest sibling, 6-year-old Emily Harper, had disappeared during a family vacation in Europe. The worldwide search had yielded nothing but dead ends and heartbreak. Their mother never recovered from the loss, fading away until cancer claimed her 5 years later. Their father became even more driven and cold, burying himself in work while raising his 3 sons to inherit his empire. They never spoke of Emily anymore. The east wing of the mansion, where her room remained untouched, was like a museum to grief that they all avoided. But now, Christopher couldn't ignore the striking similarities. The age would be right. The birthmark was identical, and those eyes, their mother's eyes. "I need to check something," he muttered, excusing himself from the table. In his father's study, he unlocked the desk drawer where old family albums were kept. Flipping through pages of happier times, he found what he was seeking. A close-up of Emily on her 6th birthday, laughing at the camera, her amber eyes shining and that same crescent birthmark visible on her small wrist. Christopher felt his heart pound. Could it really be possible? Had they just insulted their long-lost sister? And if Emma Sullivan was really Emily Harper, how had she ended up selling strawberries at a farmer's market with no knowledge of her true identity? The revelation hit Christopher like a physical blow. He sat alone in his father's study, the family album open on his lap, comparing the photograph of 6-year-old Emily with the mental image of Emma Sullivan. The similarities were too striking to be coincidental. The distinctive amber eyes, the crescent-shaped birthmark, even the small scar near the hairline that Emily had gotten from falling off her first bicycle. How was it possible? The private investigators their father had hired had scoured the globe for years. The ransom they'd expected never came. Eventually, the case went cold, and the Harpers buried their grief along with their hope. Christopher closed the album with trembling hands. He couldn't bring this to his brothers or father without being certain. James would dismiss it outright, and their father, Richard Harper, had hardened himself after losing both his daughter and wife. False hope would destroy what little humanity remained in him. "I need to know more about her," Christopher murmured, pulling out his phone. The next morning, Christopher returned to the farmer's market alone, deliberately dressed down in jeans and a plain button-up shirt. He spotted Emma immediately, arranging her strawberry display with care. Today she wore her honey-brown hair loose around her shoulders, making the resemblance to their mother even more pronounced. He approached casually, stopping to examine the berries. "These look even better than yesterday." Emma glanced up, recognition and wariness crossing her face. "Mr. Harper, back for more insults or just strawberries today?" "Christopher, please," he said, wincing at her tone. "And I wanted to apologize for my brothers. We were raised better than that." She studied him, surprise evident in her expression. "Apology accepted, I guess, though I'm not the only vendor they've treated that way." "I'm not surprised," Christopher admitted, "but I'm trying to be different." Emma's guarded expression softened slightly. "Well, points for effort. Would you like some strawberries, Christopher?" "Yes, and maybe some information." He leaned against her table. "How long have you been selling here?" 3 seasons now," she replied, filling a basket. "I rent a small plot outside town. It's not much, but the berries grow well there." "You mentioned you work alone?" Emma's movements slowed, suspicion returning. "Why all the questions?" "Just making conversation," he said quickly. "My family isn't big on small talk, if you couldn't tell." This earned a reluctant smile. "I live with my dad, adoptive dad," she clarified. "Frank Sullivan." He's been sick lately, so I'm handling the stand alone. Christopher's pulse quickened. Adoptive? Emma nodded, handing him the basket. He took me in when I was 7. I don't remember much before that. Accident when I was little. She touched the scar near her hairline unconsciously. Brain injury, some amnesia. The doctors said memories might return, but most never did. Each word confirmed Christopher's suspicions. A girl with amnesia, adopted 15